And for this, I am joined this evening by Dr. Shama Shivikwa, the Rector of the Polytechnic of Namibia. Good evening, sir. Welcome to Talk of the Nation.
Good evening, madam.
And then also we are joined by Mr. Alfred Ilukena, the Permanent Secretary of the Ministry of Education. Good evening, sir. Welcome to Talk of the Nation.
Good evening.
Also, we have a representative from NANSO, in fact, the President of the Namibian National Student Organization, Mr. Timotheus Angala. Good evening, sir, and welcome to Talk of the Nation.
Good evening, ma'am.
And then, finally, we have Mr. Saki Shangala, the Chairperson of the Law Reform Development Commission in the Ministry of Justice. Good evening, sir. Welcome to Talk of the Nation.
All right.
We will also have a fifth panelist on the show, however by telephonic line, and that is Professor Roy de Prieur, an expert in academic institution transformation. I'd like to start with you, Dr. Shivikwa, and my first question is, would you care to tell us about the rationale for this name change? Is it merely a name change, and what is really behind this?
Thank you. First of all, the name Polytechnic does not necessarily denote a university or an institution of higher learning that offers degrees and postgraduate degrees. So there are polytechnics, different types of polytechnics all over the world. Some are at post-secondary level, not necessarily at degree level. Some are degree and post-degree level. So the name is an issue. It means different things for different people and for different countries. The name university means you are offering degrees and postgraduate degrees, and you're also engaged in research. And that's well understood throughout the world. Some are four-year degrees, four-year degree granting institutions that don't do postgraduate degrees, but university is understood to be having the mandate to offer postgraduate degrees as well. So there's confusion about the name. And obviously the status comes with the name. Although you may do better than a university, you may not necessarily be awarded the same claim or status as a university. That's the first thing. Secondly, the Polytechnic has advanced beyond the initial stages. It is now basically a full-fledged university functioning with a mandate to award degrees. The moment you have a mandate to award degrees, you are a university. And that has been already the issue. The mandate has been given with the Act of the Polytechnic of 1994, so we must move on now. And as the study shows of 2012, we are already doing all the necessary things. We have the infrastructure in place, we have the systems in place. We basically need to rename the institution.
So essentially, the essence of this, with everything that you've sketched, the essence is it's a name change, because you've already honored the reality of what is required if you were called a university already.
No, at any institution, a university needs to transform all the time. It's not an incident, it is an ongoing event. So transformation hasn't stopped and it won't stop, even when we rename today. And the third point is that the country needs institutions to advance the human resources in the country. So you need to also award or give the institution the right names to feature internationally at the right levels.
The ministry, obviously a key stakeholder in this regard. I'd like to hear your perspective and whether you buy into this vision that was just shared by Dr. Shivikwa.
Yes, no, thank you very much. I do agree with the sentiments expressed by Prof. Shivikwa, but I also need to indicate that probably maybe what we need to do is step back into history to understand where we are coming from. You see, when after independence, I think there are two institutions that were established: the University of Namibia and the Polytechnic of Namibia. And each one of these had a mandate to deliver. And I think the Polytechnic of Namibia, in the understanding of the conceptual framework then, was that the Polytechnic was to respond to the middle level technical skills that the country requires, because that's what we found as being the deficit in the country. So that instead of focusing on degrees, let's first try to build our human resource at the middle level, give them the technical skills in order to move our country forward, while also concentrating on providing degrees at the university level and so on. But as Professor rightly indicated, with time, institutions tend, because they're not static,
yes,
they tend to move with changes and what have you, and the institution like the Polytechnic kept transforming itself by diversifying the kind of courses that they have been offering and so on, to a point where they started offering degree courses in specific areas, which by virtue of offering such level courses then calls for a relook at the mandate of the Polytechnic, because now that's it now needs to transform itself to correspond with what is now currently in place. So in a way, yes, I'm saying I agree. In as much as the mandate, from start, the perception or the conception was that this was going to focus on the middle level. I mean, most people ask, the obvious question to say, has the Polytechnic delivered on that mandate? And I keep saying, that's a debate for another day.
Yes.
But when you look at the transformational process,
yeah,
this is the one that we are addressing.
And that's the focus for now.
Yes.
Nonso, I'd like to hear your perspective and whether you feel that at the end of the day, with this transformation, will we achieve greater as we march towards the year 2030?
All right. Thank you very much for the question. I think the whole issue of Polytechnic transformation, we have to look at not only from an institutional point of view, we have to look at from the national lenses. For example, I know in 2012, the review of the higher education system was conducted, and several recommendations were made, which includes also the name change or the transformation of Polytechnic. I think we must not isolate the other recommendations, because those recommendations are very important to create a conducive environment for the existence of the University of Science and Technology. Therefore, I think our focus as a nation must see to it that we do not only focus on the Polytechnic transition, but also to see how we can position the whole landscape of higher education in Namibia so that it can cater for everyone. For example, we support the name change in line with the proposed recommendations. Not only the name change, but the whole recommendations, and not only one. So we want to see that once Polytechnic changes into a university, what will happen? There will be a vacuum. For example, what do you call it, middle level qualifications. Yes. Who will take it up?
Yes.
It's proposed that colleges are coming into being. How far are we? I remember one time the late minister addressing stakeholders meeting on the issue of the reform in the higher education system, in the higher education, and he was asking for a costed timeline on all these things. So therefore, I'm saying that we must support the name change or the transformation of the institution, but we must not isolate it from the other recommendations. Mm-hmm. So the other recommendations must also be implemented parallel to the name change, so that we don't leave out anyone or we don't do injustice to the nation, like the merger of the colleges with the University of Namibia.
Mrs. Shangala, from your perspective, you've been involved with the process of consultations. Obviously, the drafting up until this point, you need to see it through to its logical conclusion. When do you hope to see this process conclude?
Very shortly. I actually think we'll be completing this in June, the latest in June.
What is the purpose of these public consultations specifically?
Well, you see, a lot of people have made the comment to me many a time that, you know, Saki, you're never in the office. Saki, you travel too much. There are three ways you can do law reform. An institution does it itself, or an agency like the Law Reform Commission does it, and you do it in two ways. We can sit in our offices, drink coffee. I like cigars, I'll smoke my cigar, and I'll draft you legislation. Probably if I feel I need to talk to you, I'll walk outside and ask you, what do you think? The third way, which I think is the best way, is when you go out to the public and you ask people, what do you think, what are your views? As a matter of fact, I think this is the only way you ought to be doing law reform if you're not doing it as an institution yourself. And then even if you're doing it as an institution, you ought to go to the public, because the resultant or your institution that you're crafting, the legislation that you're putting into being, impacts people. What are their expectations? Let's not assume that these folks, members of society, particular sectors of the economy, don't have input. Yes. They are a stakeholder. They should have input. And if they don't have, perhaps what do you do to extract from them their concerns and input? So that's why we do a lot of consultation locally and internationally, so we can benchmark against the best in the world, but also do something that is relevant to the populace, to our people, and the situation that we find ourselves in.